Tonight's story is one whispered in shadows, one the Jedi wouldn't tell you. The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. A Sith Lord of immense power, whose secret experiments touched life and death itself, and whose apprentice would one day shape the galaxy in darkness. Chapter 1. A Tremor in the Force. Night settled over the city of spires like a velvet mantle, and the endless rivers of light drifted between towers as if the stars themselves had chosen to flow, not to burn. In a high suite of glass and hush, a single figure stood by the window, one elegant hand resting upon the sill, and the galaxy shivered. A soft inward quake, the kind you feel before you can name it. My young one, breathe with me, in and out, and know that a beginning can look at first like an ending. He had been apprentice and conspirator, confidant and shadow. Now he was simply Sidious. The Force pooled in him like deep water, strangely serene even as it swelled past its banks. Behind him, draperies lifted in the wind of air scrubbers. Carpets sealed their fibers, obedient servants tidying after an unseen storm. A statue toppled, one of those old sages from Duarte, their fingers forever raised in caution, and upon the polished floor lay another relic of a more recent era, immune in finery, long-limbed, dignified even in repose. He had been teacher, architect, and guardian of cunning. Now he was quiet. Was he truly at rest? Sidious did not step closer. He reached with the unseen hand instead, turning the face to the ceiling's dim glow. The features had the smooth severity of a coin's worn profile, humped nose, strong jaw, eyes that still seemed to glimmer with cold comprehension. Yet even that gleam ebbed. Like starlight seen through mist, the flesh softened, the rhythm in the room changed. The will that had pushed so far into the secrets of life's small engines, the tiny choruses within blood, let go at last. A contented breath escaped the young chancellor-to-be. Not triumphant, not cruel, simply relieved. He had imagined a contest, a desperate parry in blue-white flame. Some final lesson sprung like a trap, but the night chose stillness. Surprise, yes, surprise, my child. It is the one element the cosmos hoards. The past rearranges itself in memory. The future swims away when you reach for it. The present alone is given, and even then, it blinks. At the window, he searched the sky. He fancied he could taste iron at the back of his tongue, a hint of storm inside his chest. Low on the ecliptic, a faint ladder of stars climbed, newly bright to his eyes, though in truth ancient as dust. They looked like a herald's torches, and he decided to believe they were. So gently, so calmly, the dark side crowned its chosen, and in so gentle a crowning, the galaxy felt a tremor, and two lives, one newly unbound, one newly alone, reshaped the course of all the rest. Had the Force ever been so strong in anyone, he wondered, as if asking the night to nod. He thought, as ambitious sons think, of fathers and their fathers, of a Bith master who fled collapsing stone, of circles closed and circles broken. The old rule, the pair, the succession, the ritual of rise and rest seemed suddenly quaint, like armor in a museum, lovely to look upon, but too heavy to wear into tomorrow. This, he told himself, was the true inheritance, not a chain, but a horizon. Behind him the room whispered, as if to soothe him. And yet, my young one, the dark side is a tide that praises while it binds. It had claimed him, and now he claimed it back. Mutual possession sealed with a single decision. He let the tide move through him like a great beast flexing under the skin. He did not resist. He did not cling. He simply allowed, and in allowing, he ruled. This is one of the gentler lies power tells, and like all gentle lies, it can lull one to rest. Perhaps you wonder in your quiet bed whether the moon on the floor might rise again, whether a hand that had learned to whisper to the smallest singers of life could find a way back from silence. Sidious wondered too. He watched, waited, measured, and at last accepted the one lesson no archive can delay. Even those who would preserve others, in the end release themselves. Outside, speeders drew quiet skeins of color between towers. Dawn kept its patient counsel beyond the curve of the planet. Sidious straightened his robes. In his mind, a speech arranged itself like chessmen, each clause set where it would best urge the next. There will be a vote, he thought with a private smile. There will be grief. There would be words of steadiness, of stoic gratitude for invisible contributors to the Republic's long peace. Words that, when spoken later, would feel richer for the exquisite irony only he and the night would share. He glanced again at the moon. For a moment the mask of state faltered and the student returned, seeing the careful man who had arranged gatherings on hidden moons, who had dressed influence in respectable robes, who had taught him to handle devotion and jealousy as instruments, not masters. There was tenderness there, if only a thread, yes, even among the ambitious, small threads of fondness are woven through the cloak. Then the thread was snipped, the lesson resumed. The apprentice had surpassed the master not only in will, but in willingness to be surprised and to seize the surprise before it faded. My child, the tremor you felt at the beginning of this chapter is the gentle bell that marks a transformation. When we change, furniture tumbles inside us, old statues fall, tapestries ripple, and yet, after the stirring, there is a hush again. Let the hush come. Listen to it. Breathe in. Breathe out. The galaxy can move 1,000 leagues while you exhale, and still find you where you are, whole and unhurried. In that hush, Sidious allowed himself another long look at the stars, and thought of the boy he had met. The one born in the season when two seekers of mastery had tipped the balance toward shadow. He imagined destinies folded together like maps and placed upon a shelf for later, the way a hand might hover over one and then another, wondering which to unfurl. He told himself there would be time to choose rightly. He told himself that the Force itself had chosen. Both thoughts soothed him. It is important in troubled times to remember that even the most decisive beings are, in their quietest hours, simply trying to rest. They make choices, yes, but also lullabies for themselves, songs of inevitability, songs of prophecy. They tuck themselves in with words like will and destiny and design. Sidious did so now, and the city sang him its mechanical cradle song. Engines far below, air flows whispering, lights dimming and brightening as if breathing. When at last he turned from the window, he did not look again at the floor. He had already said farewell in his way. He would arrange matters, as busy people always do, announce the day's business, mourn briefly, accept honors, write the next chapter in a hand so smooth it would look inevitable. Outside, the new constellation climbed toward the line of dawn like a promise. Inside, the sweet reset itself, and silence took its watch. Rest, my young one, rest with the city. This is only the first stirring of the great tale, and we shall move gently from the window to the cavern below, where an earlier tremor began, and a different pair of hands arranged stone and fate with equal grace. But not yet. First, a long breath, and the soft closing of a door. Chapter 2, The Grotto of Decision. Imagine now a world of cold beauty, where the sea is a mirror and the cliffs are panes of glass. Baldemnic, a name that tastes of mineral and brine. Beneath its bright sky, tunnels wandered like veins, and in those tunnels 2 figures moved with purpose. A Bith master, precise as a metronome, and a tall moon whose patience had been sharpened on numbers and necessity. Their breath condensed, their boots placed sound where the rock had slept. My young one, let us walk a little behind them, quietly, so that we may see without disturbing what must be seen. They had come for ore, yes, cortosis, whisper thin but stubborn. Yet even that enterprise was only a symbol, a circle closed from older tales. The elder spoke of Banite beginnings, the younger glanced upward, sensing a ceiling of tradition that might yet be opened. Their suits hummed faintly, their thoughts hummed louder. Something else, buried deeper than lethane gas, pushed to the surface. The feeling that the path back to the light was shorter than the path in, and that haste, once suggested, cannot be unsuggested. The tremor began as a rumor, a whine of warning from a machine, a heat prickle across the skin. Tenebrous, whose mind could count the odds of rain from the smell of stone, quickened. It was not fear, not yet. It was the unwelcome arithmetic of risk. He raised a shield with his arms and his will, and the shield brightened the air. Behind him, hawkbats wheeled in lit spirals, a storm of small lives tossed by a larger breath. The apprentice felt the cave inhale, then exhale flame. He felt his teacher stand against it. He felt an opening. I would have you slow here, dear one, and notice the fork. The tunnel divided, the master chose a path, and the apprentice corrected him, mild and dutiful. Small moments like this collect like dew. 10 meters, a rebuke deferred, and then the grotto opened like a mouth at the cliff's edge, bright with daylight, and the ceiling began to loosen its teeth. It is often this way when old patterns are ending. First light, then falling stone. The ship trembled in its berth, precious, fragile, more than metal, a promise of departure entrusted with 2 lives. The elder held the slabbed ceiling above it, straining not with panic, but with discipline. The younger lifted his hands toward the same rumbling weight, and then eased them a precious measure to the right. There is mercy in such choices, you might say. The ship would be crushed, and so would the old rule with it. The new era would begin in hardship, not luxury. And yet, my child, in that gentle shift, there lay a harder kindness. The stone would fall where it must. When it did, the sound was thick and final, a library closing for the night. Dust rose in slow curtains. The apprentice knelt beside the elder, the ritual of farewell already forming in his voice. For a moment, old loyalty and new purpose braided together. He removed a respirator. He steadied a shoulder. He offered to fetch help he knew would not arrive. Then, with the softness of a doctor refusing a false hope, he told the truth as he needed it to be. There is only time for this. And still tenebrous taught, even under stone and trespassing heat, he spoke of strength and presumption, of the ever-present unforeseen. The best teachers do this. They lace their last breath with caution, while their pupils taste the sweetness of release. He tried to warn of something, perhaps a danger not of rock, but of pattern. Plagueis listened with dutiful stillness. The listening itself was a kindness, and at the end of it, he accepted the mantle he had already put on in his heart, and he closed the lesson with a clean, kind motion. The Bythe's body slackened, his clever mind, so vivid it had seemed a thing that could never cool, cooled. Do not shudder, little one. I will not dwell on pain. Instead, we will dwell on contemplation, because that is what came next. The apprentice watched the small choruses within his master quiet themselves. He had studied them, those hidden singers, believing that if he learned their harmonies, he might one day conduct the whole orchestra of life and death. He found instead that the notes obeyed a larger conductor, and that his hands, no matter how sure, could only coax, not command. He was not angered by this. He was intrigued. He left the cave, not as a hunted man, but as a traveler who has chosen to walk home the long way. Sea air met him. Insects tested him. Hunger rebuked his theories about superiority and diet. He was, for a day, only a body moving over a beautiful world. And this, too, is a kind of lesson the Force arranges. There were visions, oh yes, flickers of future strife on these very shores, whispers of cold wars wrapped in silk. But mostly there was distance, counted in steps and sunrise, and the simmering conviction that the accident was not an accident, that the circle had not merely closed but opened inward to a deeper chamber. When at last he came among ships and registries and ordinary folk, he practiced smaller arts, choosing a vessel with care, slicing past simple locks, leaving no rough edges where suspicion might snag. The crew he studied were simple, yes, but not unworthy, strivers, jesters, companions, bound by a shipboard democracy that warmed them in lean seasons. He told himself he would reward them for their accidental part in his deliverance. He told himself he might even rest a little before considering the next year's work. Thus do we all make vows in the afterglow of survival. My child, the path from cave to starport is long in the telling because it must be. It slows your breath to the cadence of footfalls. It shows you the worth of patience, which is the truest currency in any dark art, and it prepares you gently for what must be done when kindness and caution have both been tried and found insufficient. At the airlock he paused and composed his face. A Mun can wear courtesy like a well-tailored coat, and he did so now. He would greet the captain, he would offer recompense, he would ask for a destination that sounded like home. And if the crew's notion of justice, a vote, a debate, a conscience, interfered with the delicate structure he was assembling, he would sigh and adjust the structure with a craftsman's hand. Let us end this walk as the sea ends its waves, quietly. The grotto has fallen still, the shield is gone, the ship has become a cairn, the apprentice has left the place of stone and is ready to practice the arithmetic of will upon warmer elements. Fear, hunger, hope. Your eyes are heavy, I know. Close them for a moment and imagine the salt air on your tongue, the small ache in your legs, the satisfaction of a plan that has so far survived the light of day. We will board soon. We will speak softly. We will try kindness first. Chapter 3. The Woebegone's Compact. The cargo bay was a winter room, white breath coiling, frost storying steel. Upon a crate sat the Muen in a robe darkened by a journey's small indignities, and before him stood a captain whose head, tails marked the pace of her concern. Her crew gathered like family behind her. Zabrak, Clatuinian, Kalish, Quara, and a faithful droid whose lenses saw more than most eyes admit. They were not villains, they were working folk in a difficult season, and that made what followed gentler in its necessity, if not in its surface. My young one, let us put off harshness and call it what it was, a negotiation of fates. He offered what pride allows. Apology for spoiled cargo, a promise of recompense, and the simplicity of a destination, Moonalinst, that blue world of careful ledgers and colder dreams. He even explained, with a candor that sounded like confidence, how a Moon can survive in cold places by stilling two hearts and shepherding the third. The captain, wise in the small democracies of ships, asked for a pause. Decisions here were woven, not stamped. In the warm cabin, the crew spoke as families do when a stranger knocks after dark. Is he danger? One asked. Is he opportunity? Asked another. The droid, patient counselor, reminded them that moons rarely travel alone without intent. The Kalish jested about fate's little jackpots. The Quara, half smiling, named a temptation none of them would pursue. The Zabrak, whose honesty wore blunt edges, proposed a compromise. Drop from hyperspace, ask the authorities, then decide. The captain weighed fairness and fear with equal care and chose caution. She returned to the winter bay as the ship slid from the tunnel of stars. The moon's eyes, which had been kindly and still, sharpened. It was not anger, not truly. It was the quiet sorrow of an artisan whose careful joinery is about to be pried apart by well-meaning hands. "I cannot permit this," he said, in a tone too soft to be a threat and too serious to be ignored. Her hand hovered by her blaster, not cruel, merely prudent. We must forgive prudence. In troubled times, it is a form of love. The next moments, as recorded by a dutiful droid and the echoing steel, were swift and bright. But let us not trace every line of that brightness. Let us call it a struggle of intentions. The Muon, who had promised himself gentleness, asked the ship for quiet and received alarms. He asked the room for space and received crossfire. He asked fate for patience and received a tangle of seconds in which every option but one led to ruin. So he moved, faster than thought, but not without thought. He redirected harm where it would do least further harm. He ended certain intentions and laid others gently down. You may know the harsher version of this story, told in cantinas with flaring hands and spilled spice. I will not tell that version to you tonight. I will tell you only that when the room stilled, he knelt by those who had opposed him and tried, truly tried, to coax their small choirs of life to a steadier rhythm. He listened, he urged. He met the limits of his art with a sorrow that surprised even him. Not yet, he whispered to himself, meaning both the power he sought and the absolution he could not grant. The droid, faithful 11-4D, watched with lenses that did not judge. When addressed, it answered plainly. Yes, it could pilot. Yes, it could tend to wounds. Yes, it could seal a door against unhelpful complications. The Mune asked for food, not as a conqueror, but as a weary traveler. He asked for a medkit and a moment. He asked for a course set not to his home, but to a place where allies could listen before they leapt. In this, too, he was kind. He spared what could be spared, the ship, the record, the possibility of a life for those who yet breathe. In the quiet afterthrum, the Woebegone seemed to exhale. Emergency lights calmed to a dusk. Foam retreated to corners. Alarms stopped practicing their single terrified note. The droid's steps clicked like metronomes as it followed instructions with the comfort of clear purpose. The captain's quarters received a guest she had not expected. The galley assembled simple sustenance. The starfield, newly rejoined, opened like a curtain on a gentler sea. Plagueis, yes, call him by the name he had earned, stood for a while with a hand pressed lightly to a wound at his back, thinking of caves and ceilings and the thin layers that keep rooms livable. He thought of apprenticeships and their chosen endings, of the little boy in Theed whom he had shaped and the young man by the window who would, he suspected, one day shape the fate of many. He thought too of the smallest engines of life, of the secret aria they sang, and of how the aria grew faint under certain kinds of fear, and steadied under bread, water, and gentle hands. He called the droid. Set a course, he said softly, offering coordinates like a promise. There would be sojourns and gatherings in his near future. There would be bargains dressed as beneficence, and the careful routing of influence through banks that pretended to be neutral ground. There would, above all, be study, a long retreat into a sanctuary of glass and shadow, where he would listen to midi-chlorians as a gardener listens to soil, urging some cultures to flourish and some to sleep. When you next hear of him, it will be in that room of beakers and measured breaths, where patience is king and victory is counted in the lengthening of moments. But for now, on this small ship with its scuffed floors and honest dents, there was only a meal to eat and a wound to cleanse. The droid worked, and the Mune endured the antiseptic sting with a humor he seldom showed. "We'll make do," he murmured, meaning the ship, the galaxy, and the art of living longer than those who would end you. Even the stars outside looked a bit kinder when seen from a borrowed chair in a captain's quarters. "Rest, my young one. Here is where we pause. The first section of our tale has set its stones. The window where a tremor crowned an air. The cavern where a gentle adjustment of hands ushered in an era. The cargo bay where kindness tried first and necessity followed, stepping as softly as it could. When you are ready, we shall begin section 2 and wander the colder corridors of policy and prophecy, where smiles are contracts and histories are written in the language of sleep. But not yet. Close your eyes, breathe, listen to the ship hum, let the galaxy drift by." Chapter 4. The Fracturing of Silence. A tremor, faint at first, yet lingering, coursed through the halls of the galaxy. Though unseen, it pressed like a breath upon glass, causing the strong to falter and the weak to shiver without understanding. It was born of ambition, of betrayal, and of the shifting will of the dark side itself. On a high world of luxury, far above the struggles of the common citizen, Darth Sidious stood alone, gazing through a vast panel of transparent steel, his long fingers curled upon the sill. His reflection shimmered faintly in the polished surface. A pale visage, sharp, unyielding, and yet, in that moment, filled with a sense of almost boundless release. Within him surged a tide so great that he feared for an instant that he might be swallowed whole and vanish into its immensity, never to return. Yet this was no ending. No, my young one, it was a beginning, a true beginning. The voices came first. They whispered and roared, overlapping in a chorus both ancient and new, as if countless ages of Sith, those who had walked before him and those yet unborn, had leaned close to speak into his ears. Some voices praised, their tones soft with reverence. Others clamored like a mob, jubilant in their fury. Together, They heralded the birth of an age unlike any the galaxy had ever known. Sidious lifted his gaze, yellow eyes burning faintly, and beheld the stars. They trembled, flaring in answer, as though the galaxy itself quaked in acknowledgement of what had been set in motion. He felt it then, not merely around him, but within him, the dark side's anointing, thick and potent, a mantle laid across his shoulders. Behind him, the chamber struggled to repair itself after the storm that had been unleashed. Great tapestries swayed in unseen currents, their woven threads snapping faintly. The carpets, crafted from rare fibers, sealed themselves against the seep of spilled drink. Antique chairs and tables lay toppled, as if some phantom wind had swept rudely through, scattering centuries of refinement. Even a statue, a treasured effigy of Yanjon, lawgiver of Dwartii, lay face down upon the floor, its noble features marred, its weighty dignity broken, and beside it sprawled the form of a moon. Darth Plagueis, mentor, master, the figure whose long fingers had shaped Sidious's rise, whose teachings had carved pathways through shadow and fear. There he lay, robed in finery, splayed as if cast down by some uncaring hand. His elongated skull gleamed faintly in the chamber light. But was he truly gone? Sidious hesitated, for even in triumph, uncertainty gnawed at him. He had long suspected his master of seeking the impossible, release from death itself. Had Plagueis succeeded in some secret hour? Was this corpse merely a shell, abandoned by a spirit now lingering close, waiting to rise again? Caution ruled. Extending his will, Sidious called upon the Force to turn the body gently, rolling it upon its back. The moon's face, pallid and sharp, seemed almost peaceful, though menace still clung to his lifeless eyes. For a moment, Sidious's breath came raggedly, as though some last deception might yet spring forth. But as seconds stretched, the truth revealed itself. The flesh softened, features slackened. This was no ruse, no trick of the Sith. This was death, final and absolute. Ah, my young one, let us pause here. Breathe deeply. Imagine yourself in that chamber. Cool air against your skin, tapestries fluttering, the faint hum of machines restoring order. Picture the stillness, broken only by your own heartbeat. Feel the weight of power settling upon your shoulders as it did upon his. Sidious straightened, exhaling slowly. His chest swelled with triumph, and within a dark amusement stirred. How ironic that the great Plagueis, seeker of eternity, had reached only this, silence. He who had saved others from death had failed to save himself. The thought warmed Sidious like a cloak. The galaxy itself, he knew, had shifted in that moment. The birth of one had reshaped it once. Now, the death of another would shape it again. Billions upon billions lived unaware, yet their futures had been rewritten in this very suite, upon these very floors, and across the galaxy. Had others felt it? Had the Jedi, so pious in their towers, shuddered in their meditations? Had they glimpsed the shadow rising, or would they sink ever deeper into their slumber of righteousness, blind until it was too late? Sidious hoped so, for blindness in one's enemies was a gift the dark side rarely gave twice. He turned once more to the stars, and there, just above the horizon, a constellation climbed, new, unmarked, but glowing with the promise of consequence. To others it would seem a chance alignment of suns, guided by ancient mathematics. But to Sidious, the heavens themselves had bent in reverence, tugged into new shapes by his ascension. In his mouth he tasted the tang of blood. In his chest he felt a beast stirring, clawing at the edges of its cage. He let it rise, writhing through him like a creature of shadow and fire, not yet revealed but eager for the moment when it would be loosed upon the galaxy. The dark side had made him its vessel, and now, in turn, he made the dark side his. My young one, reflect, if you will, on the nature of such turning points, for history does not always roar with trumpets. Often it whispers, hidden in chambers, sealed behind walls, known only to a few, two beings, in a galaxy of endless trillions, yet their struggle now altered the lives of all. Such is the way of power, such is the way of destiny. And so, with a single death, the rule of two endured, passed from one frail hand into another, stronger, hungrier, more unyielding, a cycle as ancient as the Sith themselves, and yet each time renewed, each time made more dangerous. For ambition once tasted can never be set aside, and Sidious, heir to 1,000 shadows, would carry it forward, with patience, with cunning, with cruelty veiled in calm. He would not falter where Plagueis had faltered. He would not waste his life in endless experiments. He would claim not only immortality of flesh, but the immortality of dominion. Above him, the stars glittered like watchful eyes, and deep within, the dark side purred, pleased. Chapter 5. The Philosophy of the Dark Side. The night was long, and in its depths Darth Plagueis sat alone. Around him, in chambers of crystal and shadow, instruments hummed with soft precision, droids tending their work, readouts glowing, beakers bubbling in patient rhythm. Yet all this noise was but a prelude to the true silence he sought, the silence within, where the Force murmured beneath words. He closed his eyes. 3 hearts beat within his chest, 2 stilled by long practice, 1 kept alive as a metronome. With every beat he listened. With every beat he spoke silently to the chorus hidden within his blood. The midi-chlorians answered faintly, as choirs do when first asked to sing a new song. They resisted, they misunderstood, but always they listened. To Plagueis, this was the highest art. The Jedi, They meditated to merge with currents of the Force, to dissolve into its great sea. The Sith before him had seized the tide, commanding it with will, bending it until it broke. But Plagueis had found another way. He would not drown in the sea. He would not lash it with chains. He would whisper to every drop until the ocean itself obeyed. He thought of the Banite cycle, that endless repetition of master and apprentice, rise and fall, betrayal and inheritance. Yes, it had preserved the Sith, kept their fire smoldering through centuries when it might otherwise have burned out. But it was crude, wasteful, a blunt instrument in the hands of artisans who believed themselves delicate. One to embody power, one to crave it. A clever rule, yes, but still only a rule. Not a law of nature, not a truth written into the stars, just an arrangement contrived by Bane, born of desperation. Why should the dark side obey such a contrivance? Plagueis let the thought linger, savoring its quiet rebellion. He would not be confined by an old dogma, no matter how many masters had sworn to it. His master had clung to it, his master's master before that. Yet he, Higo Damask, Darth Plagueis, he would break the cycle. He would carry his power forward without yielding it, sustaining himself beyond death, never to be replaced, never to be extinguished. In this way, the Sith would finally triumph, not by endless succession, not by temporary dominion, but by permanence. Consider this, my young one. How fragile is every empire, every dynasty, every order. The galaxy is a graveyard of vanished rulers. Great republics rise, gleaming as if eternal, and then crumble into dust. Families of wealth endure for a time, until greed or envy tears them apart. Even the Jedi, so proud of their long memory, are bound by mortality. Knights grow old, masters fade, generations forget what the last swore to remember. And so every power falls, every throne is overturned, every fire dims. This was Plagueis's dream. Not conquest in the ordinary sense, not armies marching, nor fleets in orbit. His was the ambition of stillness, an empire of blood and breath, hidden in plain sight, woven into the very marrow of the galaxy. If every being's life could be influenced, nudged, commanded through its smallest singers, then no throne could ever topple, no rebellion could ever spark. All would be harmonized as an orchestra is harmonized beneath a conductor's patient hand. He rose from his seat, long robes trailing across polished floors. At the far wall, tanks of liquid shimmered, housing organisms coaxed into strange new shapes. Cells that aged and did not, cells that healed wounds too swiftly, cells that obeyed when urged, then grew silent when neglected. Each was a fragment of the larger dream, a note in the symphony he sought to write. He watched them, not as a scientist watches specimens, but as a composer listens to a choir. His expression was calm, but within, Anticipation stirred. He was close. He knew it. And yet, he was not alone. Always in the back of his mind, another presence flickered. The apprentice he had chosen. Palpatine. Sidious. That boy from Naboo, whose hunger burned brighter than any flame. In him, Plagueis saw both promise and peril. A vessel strong enough to carry forward the Sith legacy, yet also a fire fierce enough to consume its keeper. He had chosen him well, of that he was certain. But even the best choices cast long shadows. Plagueis turned from the tanks, pacing slowly through the chamber. He thought of his own master, tenebrous, pinned beneath falling stone, speaking of unforeseen outcomes. How narrow the old Bith's vision had been. He had foreseen, yes, but he had not understood. Kara Lotok, he had believed that surprise was chaos, that chance was enemy. Plagueis had learned otherwise. Surprise was simply another instrument, one to be tuned and harnessed. And what of Sidious? Did the boy understand? Could he be trusted with the true philosophy? Could he accept that death itself might be conquered, not with crude resurrection, not with necromancy, but with control so subtle that mortality would yield willingly, like a debtor handing over coins? Plagueis doubted. He hoped. He feared. He reflected. My young one, hear how the dark side tempts not only with rage and fire, but with thought, with reason, with dreams so plausible that they sound like wisdom. Is it not soothing to imagine that suffering could be ended, that death could be dismissed like an unwelcome guest, that the chaos of the galaxy could be quieted forever? Such is the gentleness of temptation, such is the lullaby that power sings to its seekers. He resumed his meditation, lowering himself into stillness once more. The force swirled around him, not calm, not storm, but something between. A tide awaiting command. He breathed, he listened, he whispered again to the choirs within his blood. Endure, he murmured to them. Heal. Listen. Some did. Some did not, but slowly, over years, they yielded more often than they refused. Slowly he bent their will toward his own. Slowly he began to believe he had found the very key that would unfasten the lock of death, and in that belief he rested. Now, my child, breathe with him. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Imagine the smallest singers within you, humming in time with your breath. Imagine them hearing you, answering you, obeying you. This is the heart of Plagueis's dream. Not thunder, not fire, but the quiet conviction that even your very blood can be persuaded to obey. Let that thought soothe you. Let it carry you. And remember always that the gentlest dreams may lead into the darkest nights. Chapter 6. The Apprentice Ascendant. The city of Theed lay bathed in light, its domes of marble and towers of creamstone, reflecting the glow of Naboo's gentle sun. Fountains whispered in courtyards, gardens swayed with lilies and grasses, and the air smelled of water fresh from the river that wound through the heart of the city. To those who dwelled there, it was paradise, a world where harmony and beauty had been woven together by generations of rulers who valued peace over war, culture over conquest. Yet beneath this serenity walked a youth who dreamed not of harmony, but of dominion, a youth whose smile charmed senators and teachers alike, but whose heart burned with ambition so deep it was like a second sun rising within him. That youth was Palpatine. Darth Plagueis had chosen him carefully, plucking him from obscurity as one plucks a jewel from a riverbed. He had seen at once the resentment that smoldered in the boy's eyes, the hunger to rise beyond the small provincial nobility of Naboo. In Palpatine, he sensed not merely the craving for power, but the willingness to hide that craving, to cloak it in charm, in eloquence, in the patient smile of one who waits for others to underestimate him. Yes, my young one, that is the rarest gift of all. The ability to wear masks so convincingly that the mask becomes the face. Training began in whispers, not in the clashing of blades. The Banite tradition required secrecy, and Plagueis excelled in it. Lessons were disguised as conversations, as meditations, as philosophical debates. Palpatine learned that the Force was not a current to be drifted upon, as the Jedi taught, but a tide to be bent to one's will. He learned to extend his anger like a blade, to sharpen his cunning until it cut more cleanly than steel. And he learned patience. Plagueis would test him, sometimes cruelly. He would withhold approval, stir doubt, or vanish for long spans of time, leaving the boy to simmer in solitude. Palpatine bore it all, quietly, his resentment growing into a deeper strength. He understood, as all Sith must, that suffering is a forge, that disappointment tempers steel more firmly than praise ever could. In this way, the boy grew into a man, and the man grew into a politician whose tongue was sharper than any vibroblade. Theed adored him. Senators admired his eloquence. Rivals envied his charisma, and his own family learned to tread carefully around his ambition. None suspected the true nature of the fire burning in his chest. To them, he was a rising statesman, a noble heir destined for greater things. Only Plagueis knew the truth, that beneath the polished smile lurked Sidious, apprentice of the Sith. Ah, my young one, how soothing is the thought that a mask can protect us, even as it hides us. Consider how often we wear such masks, even in our ordinary lives. To friends we present one face, to family another, to strangers yet another. Each mask is a shield, and beneath each shield lies the truth of who we are. A truth shown only to the few who dare to see. Palpatine wore his mask so well that even the Jedi, seated in their great temple upon Coruscant, sensed nothing of him. They meditated upon disturbances in the Force, Yet the boy walked unseen among them. His smile was their blindness, his charm their defeat. And still he rose. In the Senate, he learned to turn debate into theater, to feign indignation, to flatter rivals until they mistook him for a friend. He spoke of justice, of compromise, of the Republic's noblest ideals, all the while concealing the dagger of his ambition beneath velvet words. His colleagues trusted him, some even loved him, yet none understood that they were but stones in a path he would tread to the highest throne of all. Plagueis watched, sometimes with pride, sometimes with unease. For though he had trained his apprentice carefully, he could not deny that the fire in Palpatine's heart grew brighter with each passing year. The boy no longer simply learned, he plotted. No longer simply listened, he maneuvered. The rule of two whispered always at the edges of the chamber, as if mocking its own inevitability. One to embody power, one to crave it. Plagueis longed to believe he could escape that cycle, that Sidious would be more than an heir waiting for his master's fall. Yet in quiet moments he admitted to himself that fire cannot be contained forever. Consider, my child, how ambition is like a candle. At first it burns modestly, lighting only a small space, but feed it with oxygen, shield it from the wind, and soon the flame grows bolder. It begins to hunger for more air, more wick, more room to shine. And if left unchecked, it leaps from candle to curtain, from curtain to house, until nothing remains but smoke and ash. So it was with Palpatine. What had begun as resentment toward his family grew into disdain for his peers, and from there into contempt for the Republic itself. Why should billions of beings govern through debate and compromise when one will, his will, could rule more swiftly, more justly, more decisively? This too he had learned from his master, though he twisted the lesson into his own design. For Plagueis still dreamed of control through science, of harmony coaxed into being at the smallest level of life. Palpatine cared not for harmony, he craved dominion, plain and unvarnished, the joy of bending all others beneath his hand. At receptions he charmed, at councils he persuaded, in the back halls of power he promised favors he would never honor. And through it all Plagueis smiled faintly, telling himself that this was good, that his apprentice's rise was his own rise. That even as he whispered to midichlorians in his hidden chambers, Plagueis wondered, could he control Palpatine as he sought to control life itself? Could ambition be persuaded, nudged, harmonized as cells could? Or was ambition by its nature a flame that no conductor could contain? Ah, my young one, this is a question we must all face. For every master fears their student, and every parent fears their child, and every ruler fears the heir who waits. Ambition is patient. Ambition watches. Ambition grows, and often ambition does not wait forever. Yet in this moment of the tale, Plagueis still believed he had time. Time to complete his experiments, time to strengthen his grasp of life and death, time to bind the galaxy itself in threads so subtle no one could cut them. And Palpatine allowed his master that illusion, wearing his smile like a blade still sheathed, biding his hour. And so in Theed's golden courts, and in Coruscant's echoing chambers, the apprentice ascended, each step cloaked in charm, each word polished to disarm, each favor accepted and banked like coin. The galaxy watched him climb, and none suspected the shadow that followed in his wake. Above them all, the Force shivered faintly, as if sensing what lay ahead. The Jedi meditated and found unease they could not name. The stars themselves seemed to tremble on their axes. Something was coming, but not yet. For now Palpatine rose, and Plagueis dreamed, and the galaxy slept. Chapter 7. The Senate in Shadow. The Senate of the Galactic Republic was a chamber of vast design, a colossus of architecture intended to house the voices of thousands of star systems. Its vaulted dome seemed to stretch forever. Its tiers of floating platforms hovered like petals upon a vast flower, and its very walls echoed with centuries of deliberation. To those who entered for the first time, it inspired awe, a monument to unity. But to those who had seen it longer, who had breathed its recycled air and listened to its endless droning debates, the chamber carried a different scent, one of stagnation, of compromise worn thin, of power softened by bureaucracy until it crumbled like sand between one's fingers. Palpatine, the senator from Naboo, walked among these halls with a mask of courtesy firmly in place. His robe of crimson fell in elegant folds, his hair swept back with meticulous care. To his peers, he was the very image of refinement, a young noble, eloquent, patient, with a voice that soothed as it persuaded. But beneath the mask, Sidious listened to every word, weighed every promise, and catalogued every weakness. The Senate was not a place of unity. It was a marketplace. Influence was bought and sold here as plainly as spice in the underworld of Coruscant. To Sidious, it was not chaos. It was opportunity. Day after day, he rose to speak. His words were never too sharp, never too daring. He offered compromises, suggested amendments, supported bills that would pass regardless of his vote. He played the part of a modest voice, a newcomer, learning the intricacies of galactic politics. Yet each phrase was carefully measured, each smile an investment, each silence a deliberate gift to those who mistook it for humility. Ah, my young one, consider the art of silence. Too often we imagine power as a voice raised above others, but silence, wielded with care, can bend more fates than any speech. Palpatine knew this. He allowed his colleagues to mistake his restraint for weakness, even as he quietly learned the patterns of their ambition. He learned who hungered for wealth, who thirsted for glory, who trembled at the thought of losing their seat. Each weakness was a thread, and in time, he would weave them into a tapestry so tight no one could escape. And still, beyond the chamber, the galaxy stirred with unrest. Trade disputes grew bitter, systems whispered of secession, corporations wielded fleets with more strength than many worlds could muster. The Republic, so proud of its reach, was stretched thin. Its laws respected only where enforcement was profitable, its decrees mocked in regions where its presence had grown faint. The Jedi. Oh, the Jedi. They patrolled, they mediated, they negotiated. They comforted themselves with the illusion that their vigilance preserved balance. Yet balance had already tilted, and they and their meditations failed to notice how far it had slipped. Sidious smiled at this blindness, for it meant he could continue his work unseen. Meanwhile, in shadowed sanctuaries far from Coruscant's light, Plagueis continued his experiments. The master and the apprentice now moved in tandem, one shaping the blood of life, the other shaping the blood of politics. They spoke in coded messages, met in private upon hidden worlds, each reporting progress, each veiling his own designs beneath courtesy. Plagueis still believed he guided the partnership. He believed that when the apprentice spoke of influence in the Senate, it was in service of a greater dynasty they would share. He believed that patience would yield a galaxy subdued not by violence, but by inevitability. But Sidious had begun to dream dreams of his own. He studied not only the Republic's weaknesses, but its hunger for strong voices. Senators longed for guidance, governors longed for a single will to unite their efforts. Even the common folk, weary of corruption, yearned for a leader who could rise above it all. Palpatine saw the cracks in the edifice, and through them he glimpsed his future throne. He needed only to play the game long enough. To feign loyalty to the Senate until it bowed willingly to him, to pretend patience until impatience became the cry of the galaxy itself. And so he played the long game. He attended every session, never absent, never inattentive. He shook hands, remembered names, inquired after families. He sponsored bills that brought modest prosperity to obscure systems, earning gratitude he could call upon later. He defended rivals in public while undermining them in secret. Slowly, his influence grew. Not in dramatic gestures, but in countless small moments that passed almost unnoticed. A senator here who owed him a favor, a governor there who admired his judgment, a bureaucrat who trusted his discretion. The web spread outward, strand by strand, until even Plagueis underestimated how wide it had grown. Consider, my child, how power most often rises, not with thunder, but with a whisper, not with a sudden leap, but with the slow gathering of threads. A spider does not seize its prey at once. It spins and waits, and lets time itself become its ally. So it was with Palpatine. So it was with Sidious. And as he walked the marbled corridors of the Senate, his mind was elsewhere. He thought of the future not as possibility, but as inevitability. He saw himself not merely as a senator, nor even as a chancellor, but as the destiny of the galaxy itself. In his private hours, he gazed into the mirror, and behind the charming young noble he glimpsed the shadowed emperor waiting to be unveiled. The Senate in shadow, the master in his sanctuaries, the apprentice in his chambers, the galaxy upon the brink. All of it moved as if to a rhythm only the two Sith could hear, a rhythm that grew louder with each passing day. The tremor that had begun in a single chamber now rippled outward, touching worlds, stirring unrest, preparing the galaxy for storms yet to come. Rest now, my young one. Imagine yourself seated in the vast Senate, hearing the drone of voices, the rise and fall of endless speeches. Feel your eyes grow heavy with their monotony, and imagine one voice, calm and soothing, that rises above the rest. Not loud, not forceful, but certain. That voice will one day command the chamber. That voice will one day command all. Close your eyes, for the Senate still debates and debates and debates, and the whisper of Sidious weaves between their words.
Chapter 8. The Alchemy of Flesh. Darth Plagueis had always regarded the galaxy as a great ledger, with life and death recorded not as moral absolutes, but as entries in a book of profit and loss. Yet as his empire of knowledge widened, he found that the ledger was no longer enough. Numbers could tally victories, account balances, and casualties, but what of the invisible mathematics of the Force? What of the cells, the threads of flesh and blood, the whispers in the bloodstreams of all living beings? These could not be bound to columns of credit and debit. They required a new script, one written in the language of alchemy. And so, in hidden vaults deep beneath Munilinst and on scattered laboratory worlds, Plagueis began the work for which history would later revile him. No monument bore his name. No public records recorded the moon's excursions. But in darkened chambers where droids whispered and air scrubbers hummed like the breath of slumbering gods, he performed the most blasphemous of surgeries. The room itself seemed to resist memory, low ceilings tiled with durasteel, conduits piping cold nutrient fluid across the walls, hollow screens flickering with streams of midi-chlorian data. Glass containers lined the chamber, each filled with translucent suspension fluid. Within them floated creatures at once familiar and terrible, malformed rodents, fish with doubled hearts, primates whose eyes glowed faintly as if aware of being imprisoned. The smell of antiseptic warred with that of decay, and even the droids that served him seemed unsettled, their photoreceptors flicking uneasily when they lingered too long in the chamber. Yet Plagueis was calm, more than calm, enthralled. To him, the laboratory was a temple, its humming machines an orchestra, its subjects the unwilling chorus of an aria only he could hear. He began with the simplest of tasks, prolonging the lives of small animals. By manipulating their cellular structures through the Force, he could halt necrosis for a time, forcing tissues to repair, commanding lungs to draw in one more breath. The droids logged data meticulously, charting cellular rhythms like scribes at the side of a prophet. But to Plagueis, the true lesson lay not in numbers, but in the subtle feel of the Force as it flowed into dying vessels. "Not yet," he would whisper, extending a long, elegant hand toward a gasping specimen. "Not yet. You are mine until I release you." And so the small creature would linger, a few moments longer than it should, then a minute, then an hour. It was intoxicating. Death itself bent beneath his fingers, reluctant to claim its prize. But it was not enough. Plagueis craved more than delay. He sought reversal, command, ownership. To prolong a flicker of life was to place a bandage upon the inevitable, to control life, to birth it, to banish death. That was the truest victory, one the Sith had dreamed of, since the earliest scrolls were inked on ancient worlds. The moon turned his gaze then to larger subjects, the weak, the discarded, the forgotten. Criminals sentenced to vanish, slaves bought for mere credits, beings taken from worlds so far-flung their names were meaningless to the core. All disappeared into his vaults, their absence unnoticed in the vast commerce of the galaxy. On cold durasteel tables they lay, their breath shallow, their eyes filled with terror or with the numb vacancy of drugged submission. Plagueis touched each with the Force, and in them he listened not to their words, but to their cells. The tiny sparks of life that sang faintly in his perception. Some he mended, repairing wounds until they gasped in awe. Others he scarred deliberately, watching how the midichlorians responded, how they screamed or fell silent. He tested the thresholds of agony, of resilience, of collapse. What the Jedi would call cruelty, he called inquiry. What others would call murder, he named liberation from ignorance. Still, it was not enough. The greatest revelation came one night, if night it could be called, in chambers where no sun or star shone. Plagueis had spent hours pacing, his long fingers pressed to his temples, his mind whirling with calculations of midichlorian density. Before him lay a human male, frail and gaunt from months of captivity. His pulse faltered, his eyes rolled back. Death crept upon him like frost on glass. But as Plagueis reached into the Force, he did not merely hold the man's life. He pressed against it as one might press a palm upon water, testing its surface tension. The cells resisted, then yielded, like doors pushed ajar. For the briefest moment, no longer than a heartbeat, Plagueis felt the man's flesh as clay in his hand. He gasped, not from exertion, but from revelation. If death could be delayed, then life itself could be sculpted. That night, he did not sleep. He prowled the chamber like a beast, reviewing every experiment, every scrap of lore he had inherited from Tenebris. He pored over fragments of Bane's holocrons, over alchemical incantations, long thought lost. He saw now that each fragment, each failed experiment, had been a stepping stone to this precipice. The Force was not merely an energy to be wielded, it was a lattice of commands. And midichlorians were not its masters, but its scribes, recording and transmitting. What if the script could be rewritten? What if the Force could be compelled to inscribe a new law upon the flesh of beings? The thought thrilled him beyond reason. He began to push further, to trespass upon mysteries that even the most daring Sith had whispered of only in allegory. Subjects were opened, their bloodstreams altered by precise infusions of dark side energy. Some lived days longer than their frail bodies should have allowed. Others erupted in convulsions, their cells rebelling against commands too harsh, too swift. Many perished. But each death was not a failure. It was data, a line in the ledger of his grand accounting. Plagueis documented every flicker, every anomaly. He spoke to his droids, not as tools but as confidants, their cold binary replies a poor echo of the dialogue he craved. He longed for an apprentice, one who could understand, who could witness. Yet apprentices were dangerous. Apprentices betrayed. He had seen that truth written in the rubble of Baldemnik, in the bloodied face of Tenebris, crushed beneath stone. Still, the yearning grew. At times, in the long silence of the chamber, he would pause over a preserved body and whisper to it, not as scientist to specimen, but as master to student. One day, he would murmur, "You will not die. One day I shall call you back from the abyss, and the galaxy will tremble." Such nights blurred together. Time itself seemed to fracture in the vaults. Days passed in the galaxy above. Days of banking transactions, of senatorial debates, of starships gliding across hyperlanes. But below, in the hum of his machines, only the rhythm of experiments mattered. The moon became gaunter, his face long and hollow, his eyes burning with feverish clarity. He wore no finery in these chambers, no robes of power, only simple garments stained with fluid and ash. Yet never had he felt more regal, more sovereign. For here he ruled not merely worlds, but existence itself. But even kings may err. One subject, a Twi'lek male, lingered longer than expected. His heart, ravaged beyond natural repair, nevertheless continued to beat under Plagueis' command. Hours passed, then days. Plagueis watched, exultant. "See," he whispered, "I have written new law upon you." But then, without warning, the Twi'lek's body convulsed. His cells, twisted into alien obedience, erupted in rebellion. Blood boiled, veins burst. The man died screaming, not from failure of organs, but from collapse of the very script of his being. Plagueis staggered back, shaken. For the first time in years, he felt something akin to fear, not of death, but of error. The Force had mocked him, granting a taste of victory, only to snatch it away. And in that failure, a whisper came, not in words, but in sensation. The dark side itself laughing, reminding him that mastery was never given, only seized. Plagueis bowed his head, long fingers curling into fists. "So be it," he murmured. "I shall seize it. Even if it takes 1,000 lives, 1,000 worlds, 1,000 years." He extinguished the lights of the chamber, leaving only the glow of suspended bodies in their glass prisons. The hum of machines continued, steady as the pulse of the galaxy itself. And Darth Plagueis, the moon who sought to master death, returned to his work with redoubled hunger. Chapter 9, The Shadow of Sidious. Coruscant was a world of endless facades. Towers climbed so high they pierced the clouds, their shining windows reflecting starlight as though each were a sun in miniature. Boulevards teemed with beings of every shape, every tongue, every ambition. Hollow billboards flashed across entire districts, announcing the triumphs of the Republic with rehearsed grandeur. To the casual eye, it was a jewel, a galactic heart that beat with promise and prosperity. But beneath the sheen, rot spread. The underworld festered with crime, corporations bent laws into weapons, senators bartered legislation like traders in a spice den. The city world was a palace of illusion, gilded on the outside, corroded within. Palpatine understood this truth as few others did. He moved through Coruscant, not as an awed visitor from Naboo, but as a predator in his chosen hunting ground. By day, he was Senator Palpatine, polished, articulate, a rising voice from a picturesque system. His speeches were gentle but firm, his proposals measured but thoughtful. He knew when to concede, when to resist, when to flatter. His colleagues found him refreshing in an age when so many senators appeared jaded, worn down by compromise. By night, the mask shifted. In private chambers, far from prying eyes, the smile softened into a smirk and the eloquence sharpened into calculation. Here, Senator Palpatine was shed and Darth Sidious stood revealed. Sidious cultivated his networks as one cultivates a garden. Each ally was a seed planted in fertile soil, watered with favors, sheltered with promises, pruned when they grew unruly. Some bore fruit, loyalists who would one day swear fealty without hesitation. Others withered, and he let them fall unnoticed into irrelevance. On the Senate floor, he learned the names of aides, the birthdays of colleagues' children, the preferred vintages of core world nobles. Such details seemed trivial to others, but to Sidious they were blades, ready to be unsheathed at the perfect moment. Gratitude could be weaponized. So could guilt. So could affection. He dined with rivals, laughing at their jokes, nodding at their shallow philosophies. He walked arm in arm with fellow senators through the grand promenades, listening intently to complaints he would later twist to his advantage. He was everywhere, always present, never threatening, and slowly, piece by piece, he became indispensable. Plagueis, in his sanctuaries, congratulated himself on the apprentice's progress. In Sidious, he believed, the Sith had gained a politician who could pave the way for their dynasty. A mask to charm the galaxy, while the Master wrought true transformation in secret. But Sidious was no mere mask. He was a furnace, quietly stoked, waiting for the moment when fire would consume the chamber. He studied not only politics, but the psychology of power. He watched how senators leaned forward when flattered, how they hesitated when their honor was questioned, how they clung desperately to titles that meant little beyond their home worlds. He memorized their rhythms. More importantly, he studied the Jedi. Not openly, never openly, but from the corners of banquets, from the shadowed edges of diplomatic briefings. The way they entered a room, serene but detached. The way their words carried moral weight even when empty. The way their presence unsettled the guilty and reassured the weak. They were symbols, ancient, respected, untouchable, but they were also complacent. Sidious felt their blindness each time they passed near him, their vaunted senses dulled by centuries of victory. They did not see him, they could not. And that blindness was his greatest weapon. Ah, my child, think of the sweetness of moving unseen among those who claim to see all. Imagine the Jedi, guardians of peace, walking past the very shadow of the Sith without stirring. Does it not soothe you, this irony? That blindness wears the mask of wisdom. That sight itself can be a prison. Sidious savored this irony. Each encounter confirmed what he already knew. The Order would fall, not by storm or by blade alone, but by their own self-assurance. Meanwhile, he began to gather more than senators. In the warrens of the underworld, he courted criminals, smugglers, mercenaries. He offered contracts too generous to refuse, then bound them in debts impossible to repay. Gangs that once warred in alleys now swore oaths to a benefactor whose face they never saw. Syndicates that had existed in shadows for centuries began to move subtly under his hand. He was building not merely influence, but infrastructure. A network that spanned from the Senate's highest towers to the gutters of the lowest levels. Where the Republic relied on bureaucracy, Sidious relied on loyalty bought and sold in whispers. Where the Jedi relied on honor, he relied on need, fear, greed. And unlike honor, these never failed. Plagueis asked questions, of course. He was not blind to the growth of his apprentice's influence. But Sidious deflected with ease, always attributing success to their shared cause. For our dynasty, he would say. For our permanence. The words soothed the master, even as they concealed the truth. Sidious was no gardener tending another's vineyard. He was the storm that would one day uproot it. Yet he remained patient. For patience was the lesson Plagueis had indeed given him well. He did not hurry. He did not boast. He let his shadow grow so slowly that even those who cast their gaze upon it mistook it for the natural shade of politics. Consider, my young one, how shadows move. They do not leap forward in haste. They lengthen gradually as the sun sinks lower, unnoticed until suddenly they stretch farther than one imagined possible. So it was with Sidious. So it was with his power. In secret, he practiced arts Plagueis had taught him: concealment, persuasion, the subtle bending of will. Not upon great masses, not yet, but upon individuals. A senator who doubted suddenly found clarity after a quiet word from Palpatine. A bureaucrat who had been reluctant to sign a document suddenly signed with confidence after a simple touch of the hand. The dark side flowed through such encounters like a whisper, leaving no trace but the inevitable outcome Sidious desired. And each success thrilled him, for he was not merely persuading, he was commanding. The difference was intoxicating. One evening in his private apartments, he stood before the mirror. The city's glow filtered through tall windows, casting him in pale gold. He gazed into his own reflection, the young noble, the rising senator, the image of refinement. And behind those features, in the depth of his eyes, he saw it. The shadow waiting, the crown unseen, the emperor yet to be revealed. He smiled, not the smile of charm he wore for others, but the true smile, sharp and merciless. For though Plagueis still dreamed of controlling life itself, Sidious already controlled the living. And soon the galaxy would belong not to science, not to experiments, not to philosophies whispered to cells, but to the will of one man, his will. Chapter 10, The Gathering Storm. The galaxy is vast, my child, yet in certain ages the same unease stirs in every corner as if an unseen wind moves across the stars. Such was the age into which Darth Plagueis and his apprentice guided their designs. To farmers on quiet moons, it felt like bad harvests. To traders in the lanes, it appeared as tariffs and embargoes. To senators in their lofty chambers, it arrived as quarrels over procedure. But all of it was the same, a gathering storm. To the citizens of the Republic, life appeared normal enough. Ships still crossed the hyperlanes, the Jedi still patrolled as guardians, the Senate still assembled beneath its vast dome. Yet beneath the polished marble, beneath the sunlight that shone upon plazas and promenades, cracks had spread like fractures in glass. Worlds long loyal to Coruscant's decrees had grown restless. Corporations wealthy beyond measure commanded armies of their own and no longer trembled at the Republic's displeasure. And the people, the people whispered that the Senate was too slow, too divided, too weak to govern a galaxy of such immensity. To the unwise, it was only politics. To Palpatine, Sidious, it was opportunity. In the Senate, he sat with perfect composure, his crimson robes folded neatly, his voice calm amid uproar. Senators shouted, accusing one another of corruption, of negligence, of betrayal. Platforms floated forward in angry clusters, each voice rising to drown out the last. To an untrained ear, the chamber seemed a chaos of sound, but to Sidious, it was music. Every shout, every plea, every faltering hesitation revealed weakness. He noted who grew flustered when challenged, who blustered to conceal fear, who yielded at the promise of compromise. These were not rivals. They were pieces on a board, each waiting to be moved. When his turn came to speak, he never raised his voice. He spoke with reason, with measured calm, offering not answers, but balance. Let us seek harmony, he urged. Let us consider both sides. His words carried no threat, no arrogance, and so they charmed. Many senators left the chamber believing Palpatine was their ally. None realized they had been guided toward the place he desired them to stand. This, my young one, is the subtlest of storms, the kind that does not rage in winds but gathers in silence, unnoticed until it has already arrived. Beyond the chamber, across the stars, the storm deepened. The Trade Federation extended its fleets, its droid armies expanding in secret. The Techno-Union fortified worlds under the guise of protecting commerce. The Corporate Alliance, the Banking Clan, the Intergalactic Guild, each grew bolder, whispering that the Republic could not restrain them. Citizens on the Rim began to wonder whether the Republic deserved loyalty at all. They spoke of secession, of self-governance, and on those worlds, Sidious's agents fanned the flames, spreading rumor, doubt, and discontent. The Jedi, seated high in their temple, felt unease ripple through the Force. They spoke of disturbances, of currents shifting. They dispatched envoys to mediate disputes, to soothe tempers. But the Order did not see that the storm they sought to calm was being summoned deliberately by hands hidden in plain sight. And Sidious, he moved among them unnoticed, smiling, bowing, persuading. The shadow of the Sith walked beneath the sun, and the Guardians of Light saw nothing. Plagueis, meanwhile, remained fixed upon his experiments. The moon saw the storm but mistook it for distraction. Politics to him were noise, useful, yes, but secondary. The true triumph, he believed, would not be won in the Senate or on battlefields, but in laboratories where death itself could be conquered. To his apprentice, he spoke of destiny, of Sith who would never die, of dynasties unbroken, of immortality bound to their will. Sidious bowed his head, listening with feigned reverence. Yes, Master, for the future we shall share. His voice was smooth, his eyes downcast. But within he smiled, for Sidious desired no shared throne. The galaxy was not large enough for two emperors, and as every Sith before him had known, one must fall for the other to rise. Ah, my young one, reflect with me. Is this not the oldest of cycles? The teacher who pours knowledge into the student's mind, only to see the student one day eclipse them. The parent who nurtures the child, only to be replaced when age yields to youth. It is nature's law, neither cruel nor merciful, and yet when it comes, it feels always like betrayal. So it would be with Plagueis and Sidious. The storm gathered, and both believed themselves its master. Yet one would stand at its center, and one would be swept away. Each day, Sidious's influence grew. In the Senate, allies leaned toward him unconsciously, as if the calm of his presence steadied their storms. In the underworld, syndicates that once rivaled one another now moved subtly at his command. Criminals who feared nothing feared the unseen patron whose voice reached them through whispers. He studied the Jedi carefully, noting how even their most perceptive masters betrayed fatigue. They had defended the Republic for centuries, and in their long service they had come to mistake vigilance for victory. Sidious knew better. Vigilance without suspicion was blindness, and blindness would be their doom. Meanwhile, the people of the Republic, merchants, farmers, citizens in teeming cities, looked upward at their leaders and saw only failure. They cried for unity, for strength, for a voice that could rise above endless squabbling. They did not yet know it, but they were already calling for Sidious. In his private chambers, the senator from Naboo stood before tall windows, gazing over Coruscant's glittering night. Ships traced bright lines across the sky, millions of lights glowing in endless towers. To ordinary eyes, it was beautiful. To Sidious, it was prey. He raised a glass of Nabooan wine, savoring its taste, and in the glass's reflection, he glimpsed not the young noble, but the sovereign he was destined to become. The storm gathers, he whispered to the silence, and when it breaks, the galaxy shall be mine. Chapter 11. The Night of Betrayal. The night over Coruscant lay like a velvet cloak, soft and endless, pricked by a billion points of starlight. Speeder lanes flowed in quiet ribbons, and the towers, those pale needles of glass and steel, gleamed as though the city itself were breathing in its sleep. High above the lower decks and their distant murmurs, a private suite shone with a gentler glow. Warm lamps, careful shadows, carpets that hushed every step. A chamber prepared for celebration, and beyond celebration, for a kind of stillness only the dark side truly understands. Within those walls, apprentice and master sat together, the hour late, the future very near. A delicate bottle of Celestan wine stood uncorked upon a sideboard, its fragrance layered and bright. Beside it, crystal chimed faintly as it was lifted and set down again by careful hands. The air scrubbers purred. Heavy draperies, each woven with scenes of ancient lawgivers, stirred with a faint breeze from the climate control. And in a place of quiet honor, the statue of Yanjon seemed to listen, as if stone ears could attend to a history being rewritten not with armies, but with a whisper and a glass raised in toast. Again, the apprentice said pleasantly, an elegant finger resting on the parchment-white page. Let us polish the second passage. The Senate will expect humility at dawn. His voice carried no strain. It was velvet upon marble, the practiced calm of courtesy. His eyes, however, my young one, his eyes gleamed as planets gleam when a new sun is born. Opposite him, the tall moon inclined his narrow head and obliged. He spoke of stability, of unity, of the unseen hands that worked tirelessly so that the Republic might endure. He spoke as a craftsman of promises, measuring each clause, trimming each flourish, leaving only what would soothe even the most stubborn ear. Now and again the droid 114D approached, fussing in its discreet way, adjusting temperature, clearing crystal rings from the tabletop, ensuring the ventilation kept perfect balance. "More wine, Magister?" it asked in a voice burnished by long service. A nod ensued, a glass refilled. The apprentice accepted his own with a smile practiced in the mirror of many years. He praised the phrasing, he suggested another line. He invited the moon to read once more the paragraph that thanked the brave, the loyal, the unseen. Each revision coaxed another sip, and another, until the careful lines between wakefulness and drowsy contentment began to blur like city lights in mist. Tonight, the sun god may rest, the master had said earlier, in a mood rare and expansive. And so the suite was quiet, no golden helms glinting by the door, no heavy footfalls echoing down the hall. Only the hum of the scrubbers, the soft sibilance of poured wine, the rustle of parchment. If the city beyond felt the tremor that would ripple outward from these hours, it gave no sign. It dreamed in its vastness, letting the two within the high chamber decide the shape of a morning none could yet name. The apprentice praised again. He lifted a line, made it soar, then gently set it down. He recalled moments of instruction. On Maigito's windswept ice, among murmuring tanks in secret vaults, beneath old holocrons that smelled faintly of dust and oaths. He remembered the tightening of a hand at his throat long ago, a lesson in fear. The closing of a door when he had wished for praise, the choice that had made him what he was. He remembered, and he forgave nothing, even as he smiled. "Perfect," he said at last, and the word floated in the air like a calm bell. Across from him the moon's lids lowered, then fluttered open, then lowered again. Not slumber, not yet, but the restful haze that follows victory and fine wine. The transpirator mask sat unused upon a polished tray, as though the lungs had decided to trust the night. The apprentice's gaze lingered on the device for the briefest moment, then drifted away, as though idly appraising the weave of the drapes, the tilt of the statue, the gleam upon the glass. He rose and walked to the window, where the city spread beneath his reflection like a jeweled ocean. "How small it looks," he murmured, "and how very near." The moon replied in a voice softened by years and triumph. He spoke of permanence, of the day when death itself would bow to a reasoned will. He spoke of cycles broken, of the rule of two remade into partnership, of fear banished from the word Sith as darkness became serenity, and serenity dominion. He spoke, as he often had, not in the language of anger, but in the language of inevitability. And then, sighing, not sadly, simply, peacefully, he leaned back against the cushions, eyes half-lidded, as if listening to some slow tide at the edge of sleep. "My young one, breathe. Imagine the city's hush in your bones, the soft whir of filters, the whisper of cloth. Imagine, too, the weight of a certain decision polished over years until it is smooth as riverstone, ready to be lifted at last. What follows in our tale is not frenzy. It is not a clash of blades. It is a quiet, a turning of a page, a candle snuffed with gentle fingers so that a greater fire may be seen. The apprentice set his glass aside. He turned, not swiftly, not with flourish, but as one who has rehearsed a final line until it feels like breathing. In him the dark side rose, not as tempest, not as scream, but as a tide that erases footprints from a shore. He raised an empty hand, palm relaxed, as if to bless the room. Blue light gathered there, not jagged, not cruel, more like a storm glimpsed through curtains at a distance. Soft flicker, deep hum, the faintest scent of rain before it falls. It flowed outward, a hush that glowed, and the air itself seemed to lean towards sleep. The moon stirred. His eyes opened, not in alarm but puzzlement, like a scholar waked by a question he had meant to answer in the morning. For the space of a heartbeat he reached inward, as had become his lifelong habit, and he asked the smallest choirs to listen. They did, for they always had. But wine and contentment and the lateness of the hour are cunning tides, and sleep is a kind persuader. He lifted a hand, elegant, long-fingered, and the air around it trembled as if a small weather had entered the room and, finding only warmth, decided to linger rather than rage. "Apprentice," he said, and the word was neither angry nor pleading. It was a naming, a remembering of a promise made in a time when two might have walked forever side by side. The apprentice inclined his head, acknowledging the title for the last time. The light in his palm thickened, then thinned, like a breath drawn and released. The transpirator rattled upon its tray as though recalling its purpose, and then was still. Tapestries swayed with a breeze that had no source. The statue of Yanjon turned the city's gleam along its silent brow. The moon tried to stand, not with fury, with dignity, but the night is heavy after celebration, and carpets are soft, and even the strongest towers do not leap. He settled back, and the apprentice, who had learned patience so well he had given it new names, let the tide continue. No harshness, no haste. Only the quiet writing of a law older than any speech, that where one reign ends, another begins. And the sky, which above every world accepts the change without a ripple, goes on shining all the same. A tremor moved then, not through the floor alone nor the walls, but through the vastness beyond. It was felt by no one awake, and yet by everyone asleep. A small adjustment in the weight of the night, as if a distant star had sighed, and in that sigh found a new orbit. The apprentice felt it pass through him like warm water. He did not lower his hand until the room itself seemed to exhale. Silence followed. Not the silence of fear, nor the silence of shock. The silence that lingers after a candle is pinched and the darkness is complete. The city breathed below. The droid, at last understanding the shape of the moment, busied itself at the room's edges, tidying what could be tidied, recording what must be recorded. The statue watched, the drapes rested. The apprentice stepped closer then, and with a small gesture, almost reverent, he arranged the master's mantle, smoothing a fold that had fallen astray. He regarded the face that had taught him so much, the planes of an intellect that had sought to make death a negotiable guest, the mouth that had praised restraint, the brow that had furrowed at foolishness and softened at a well-turned phrase. Wise, he murmured, and the word held both truth and verdict. So very wise. He glanced to the window where the city sky picked out faint constellations. And yet, he added softly, the oldest lesson remained. He turned away and walked to the panoramic glass. The reflection that looked back was no longer apprentice and never again merely senator. It was a calmer visage, a quieter posture, a crown that did not need metal. In the depths of that reflection, something vast uncoiled and settled its coils around him in recognition. Outside, the first pallor of false dawn drew a line across the east, though morning was still hours off, night held. Be at rest, he said at last, not to the city which had never ceased resting, but to the one who had been his guide and his gate. It was not gloating. There is no need to gloat when inevitability fulfills itself. He lifted his glass once more, tasted the last sweetness of the wine, and set it down, leaving the smallest circle upon the polished wood, like an eclipse made by crystal and time. My young one, breathe again, in and out. Let your shoulders loosen. Hear the quiet that follows a decision kept too long in the mind, now done and set among the things that cannot be undone. The dark side, which makes property of those who claim it, had found its new steward, and the city, somewhere beneath, dreamt of a dawn that would look like any other, golden, busy, confident, never knowing that the name of the morning had changed. In halls far away, some would later say they felt a disturbance and could not name it. Others would insist that they slept deeply and woke refreshed, as though the galaxy had smoothed a wrinkle from its brow. Both were true in their way, for such is the nature of great turnings. They pass like a hand across silk. Only the nap knows which way it has been brushed. The apprentice, no longer apprentice, stood until the horizon drew a paler line. Then he lowered the lights as one dims lanterns before a ship leaves harbor. He walked once through the chamber, not to check, not to doubt, simply to memorize the arrangement of things, the drapes and their hush, the statue and its listening, the droid tidying, the transpirator at peace, the wine's last gleam, the page with the perfect speech for a dawn that would indeed come, though the voice that had edited it would not. And then he let the door sigh closed behind him, and the suite, relieved of its final task, went still. Chapter 12, The Tragedy Remembered. My young one, the night has finished its long, slow turning, and the city is pale with false dawn. What began as a murmur in private vaults now moves outward like a tide, touching corridors of marble, towers of glass, and the quiet rooms where stewards dress for morning duty. The master rests, the apprentice is remade, and the galaxy, still drowsy, does not yet know that its dreams have shifted. Let us walk gently through this hour as one glides along a colonnade at sunrise, listening to fountains barely awake, stepping softly so as not to wake what should sleep a little longer. The suite is still. Behind its door, silence has gathered and folded itself neatly, like a cloak across the back of a chair. The statue of Yanjon glows faintly in the hush, its stone brow warmed by the promise of day. A page of speech rests where it was left. A circle of wine dries to a small eclipse on polished wood. The transpirator sits quiet and relieved. 11-4D begins the rituals of closure. A curtain drawn with care, a lamp turned down, a final adjustment to the climate control so that the air holds the calm of a shrine. Nothing is hurried, nothing is forced. The droid understands, in the way long service teaches, that a certain reverence is owed to last things. Beyond the window, Coruscant's first lanes brighten, the river of traffic renewing its glittering flow. The city resumes its murmuring, deliveries resume to kitchens, cleaners humming, porters setting out fresh flowers in marble halls. Somewhere a senator clears his throat and reviews a note card. Somewhere a courier splashes through a puddle left by night rain. Somewhere a child wakes and, seeing towers like silver cliffs, presses closer to a caretaker's arm. The galaxy's countless small tendernesses continue. They always do. Even when the great wheel has clicked one notch onward. And in a high lift whose walls reflect light like a slow aurora, a solitary figure descends. Cloak composed, face serene, he reviews a path rehearsed so long that each turn feels as inevitable as the phases of a moon. In him the dark side lies quiet and satisfied, like a sea after tide, drawn back from the shore but leaving every grain arranged as it wished. He does not hurry. He does not look back. If he hears the echo of a transpirator's quiet or the faint sigh of draperies settling after a breeze that never was, he gives no sign. The door parts. The corridor receives him. The morning opens like a book whose ending has already been chosen. In the Senate, dawn lights the rim of the great dome. Platforms drift into place with ceremony's unthinking grace. Pages concoct last-minute substitutions, transmitters are tested, translators murmur, 1,000 voices clear themselves, and the great chamber breathes in. Above, banners hang very still, like thoughts not yet spoken. News of the banking magister's passing is not yet in the air. It will seep slowly, intentionally, and when it does, it will be tidied by clerks, softened by statements, folded into the day's business as if it were the natural fading of a season. Such is the way of things when power chooses quiet over thunder. On worlds far from Coruscant, other mornings go about their rituals. On Naboo, silver water takes the first color of sky. In Theed, gardeners comb dew from lilies with small wooden combs. In the Outer Rim, traders watch for customs frigates and sigh with relief when no new levy is announced. In the Jedi Temple, masters sit with eyes closed, and more than one frowns, as if a distant weight has shifted upon a shelf. They cannot name it. They reach for the disturbance and find only the echo of a room becoming calm. Balance, they tell themselves. A passing tremor, perhaps sparked by politics' ordinary tides. They rise, adjusting robes, and prepare to advise the very Senate, whose brightness now sharpens along its edge. And the apprentice, no longer apprentice, enters, attended by warm nods, by grateful glances, by colleagues who believe they are seeing a modest man carried upward by merit and timing. He thanks them gently. He speaks of unity, of patience, of a republic worth renewing. He is the voice that never shouts, the hand that never trembles, the smile that steadies a drifting room. His platform glides to its place. He rests his palms upon its rail. He looks upward into the dome, not as a pilgrim, not as a petitioner, but as an owner surveying a property he has long prepared to inhabit. Now breathe with me, my child, in and out, slow and even, Imagine the great chamber as a vast lake, and imagine a single pebble falling not upon its surface, but into its depths, where only the oldest fish can feel the ripples. That is how the dark side moves when it wishes to remain elegant. No splash, no spray, only a widening circle below sight, touching every shore without letting the sky know it has been disturbed. Speeches follow as they must. Forms are honored as they must be. Elections proceed with ceremony that has wrapped the Republic for 1,000 years like a soft, ritual shawl. And when the tally glides to its conclusion, when the apparatus of state so slow in quarrel proves swift in acclamation, the chamber breaks into its applause, the cultivated, cultured sound of a people who have convinced themselves they have found the measured center they desired. He bows, he thanks, his voice is velvet upon stone. He promises stability, not glory, service, not drama. He is the safest dream of a tired polity, a steady hand at the tiller, a man who makes even the word power sound like a lullaby. Elsewhere, in shadow, the legacy of the moon arranges itself. Records are sealed. Holdings pass into trusts that will answer to offices with new names. Laboratories go dark on schedules already drafted. A private moon burns in memory only. An order of assassins scratches a tally into the margin of its annals. A debtor sighs to find his ledger forgiven without explanation. Such is the final courtesy of a master strategist, to ensure that even his disappearance advances the plan. And yet, oh yet, in the architecture of the dark side, what endures of him is not assets, nor charters, nor private symposia. What endures is a question whispered to the smallest choir: can life itself be persuaded? Can death be taught to wait at the threshold, hat in hand, while purpose passes by? That question does not die here. It reclines, it listens, it migrates into the pockets of future years, where it will be asked again beside a hospital bed, beside a cradle, beside a throne. It will be told as a tale in a dim opera box, to a knight whose heart is full of love and fear. It will be called the tragedy of a wise one who could save others from rest, but could not save himself. And the one who tells it will do so with a voice so calm, so kindly, that the listener will mistake a coil for a comfort and lean closer, and agree that anything, yes, anything, would be worth the price of preventing a final goodbye. So our tale returns to you, my young one. For sleep, too, is a kind of surrender, and every night we negotiate with it. We make our bargains, one more page, one more thought, one more look at the stars, and then the body, that faithful republic, chooses calm. Darth Plagueis believed that rest could be deferred forever by technique, by persuasion, by the governance of choirs too small to see. He was not entirely wrong. He coaxed many moments into lingering. But the dark side, patient and practical, prefers a simpler economy, endings in service of beginnings, doors closed so that other doors may open, a hush that allows a new voice to be heard. And so the hush holds. The city brightens. The new chancellor, yes, let us call him by that daytime name, accepts the responsibilities the Senate places upon him. He smiles at old friends, consoles old rivals, promises both sides that they have been understood. In the underworld, old feuds calm under invisible direction. In the boardrooms, new contracts are signed with clauses that tilt ever so slightly toward a single will. In the temple, the masters consult archives, not realizing the index has been quietly rewritten. Nothing violent, nothing crass. The finest hand is the one you never feel upon your shoulder. Rest now. Imagine the galaxy as a canvas newly stretched upon a frame, the first priming strokes drying in morning light. Soon storms will paint it, soon brave colors will strive and blend and clash. There will be queens who refuse to accept captivity, pilots who breathe luck like air, boys who stare into twin suns and feel a tug older than language. There will be clones marching in serene unison, and masks, forgive the word, that change a voice forever. But that is for another night. And for now, we honor the quiet that precedes the overture. Take one breath more with me, in and out. Listen to the last footfall of the departing hour. The tragedy has been spoken into the stone of history. The wise one sleeps. The apprentice wears his new name as if he had been born to it. And the stars, which witnessed both vow and undoing, remain as they were, strewn like gentle embers across the velvet of the void, patient as only stars can be. Lie down, my erring subject. Fold your worries as the droid folded garments upon the quiet chair, and let the dark, which in our tale was a hungry thing, become in your room a sheltering cloak. Tomorrow will be long, the drum of politics steady, the chorus of destiny loud. But for you tonight there is only this, the steady breath, the soft weight of blankets, the knowledge that stories can hold us safely, while the world rearranges itself outside the window. Sleep now, for the dark side keeps watch, and the galaxy, for one more hour, is gentle.